All right. Thank you so much, guys, for being here today with us. Today, we are going to share with you all our experience with the solution on production for 2 years. My name is Jaime Pradenas. I am Senior Blockchain Product Manager in Santiago Exchange. With me is Marco Alarcon. He's the head of blockchain architecture. He's gonna do the hard part of this presentation. So I'd like to start briefly with a small introduction about our country, Chile, and also the Santiago Exchange. That beautiful picture comes from the north of our country. It's a very nice place for astronomy. Well, we're the longest country in the world. It is actually 2,690 miles long, and we were the first country in South America being part of the OECD, and we also have the highest GDP in South America. Well, Chile has been recognized as a very nice place to invest. That's why we have all those records there, the economical freedom, business environment, and foreign regime also. Other facts about that are, for example, we produce a lot of copper in Chile and also have a lot of lithium reserves. About our products for exportation, our wines are really, really good if you want to try some. And also our fruits are also really, really good. All right. Our company, Santiago Exchange, is a 127 years old company. It's a listed stock exchange, so if you want to get a stock, you can go to the market and get one. It's really easy. We trade every day $3.5 billion, mostly in fixed income. Also in 2018, we were chosen like the most innovative stock exchange in South America. So why was that? Actually, we're a technological company. Most of our revenues comes from technological incentives. So that's why. Now Marco is gonna talk to you about the main topic.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Jaime. Well, as Jaime said, we are a technological company mainly. It's very strange because normally one thinks about a stock exchange as a more traditional way, a centralized company. We are also a centralized company, but we first are a software factory, and that's why we are talking here. First, what I'm going to do is a summary of the steps that we underwent to get our blockchain solution that is called Security Lending Repository, how we got that in production. It's a very short tale. We started from an idea, created a minimal viable product, and then we released that not easily in production. Well, this is after what happened about that. When everyone is happy, we open the champagne bottle, we go and party, etc., but the system has to keep going. And that is the hardest part of every software product. So for that, you need to plan how you will scale your network and how you can keep it going as smooth as you can. First, we took this idea, blockchain is coming, and we saw that mostly as a threat. Why? Because blockchain is a disruptive technology. It's a decentralizing technology. And as a stock exchange, it's the opposite. It's a centralizing entity. So we took the best, we analyzed it in conjunction with IBM, a series of use cases, and we selected short sale lending as the best use case to implement a minimal viable product. Why it's that? Because it doesn't require regulatory changes, and all the benefits comes mostly from optimization in the current processes. So We then created our minimum viable product instead of, well, there is a lot of POC out there that stays in the POC stage, right? Or as Jason Kelly from IBM once told us, POI, proof of incompetence. Okay, well, this is not a POI, it's a real network that is running almost for 2 years, and the core of the network is the Santiago Exchange. We are the administrator of the network. We run the certificate authority service, so we decide who gets in and who gets out. Each participant in this network, mainly brokerage houses and the regulator, can own their own peer node. We have 2 kinds of nodes: active peer nodes that can read and write, and passive peer nodes that only need to consume information. This is a market-wide network. It interconnects 17 institutions in Chile through mainly 3 different ways. We have the least exciting way is through graphical user interface. It's for the brokers that don't want or don't have the expertise to do deep integration with their system. So they use the stock exchange trading system, and it looks like seeing a Tesla car from outside. It looks like a car. Then we have the API way to interconnect through REST services. Is like sitting on a Tesla car. It looks nice, but it still looks like a car. But it allows you to do more deep integration. And then we have the tier way, and it's owning a node, a peer node. That is like driving the car right now. You see that it drives differently. So in this way, we have a bank that has their own peer, and we have a broker and a bank with their own peer. We have 2 interconnected entities through this way. And for them, they can use the information like it's their own database. Okay, for the first version, well, we started in development with Fabric 06 beta. We like to be tested on. And the first version in production was with Fabric 1.1. The initial consensus is Kafka, Apache Kafka with Zookeeper. And since we started with early version of Fabric, we didn't have the private data, so we had to do by hand using separated Fabric channels. And we had to create a synchronization mechanism, custom synchronization mechanism to keep the channels with the information replicated. Currently, we have 8 main business chain codes and 6 general purpose chain codes. As an example of a general purpose chain code is the system date, how every node agree which day is now. Then, how we did the rollout? Well, the rollout, this is the same diagram that I shown in the previous Hyperledger Global Forum. This is how we went in production. We took 3 months of testing with all the market participants. We had to do some minor final adjustment before going live. And mainly is based on a Fabric network. We control the certificate authorities. We can connect through secure channels, mainly VPN, MPLS, or fiber channels, other participants. And these, as you see in yellow, are the legacy systems that are integrated with the current Fabric network. The launch date was June 2018, and we have, well, 2 metrics of usage. Master service agreements is the enabled contracts to operate in short sales. Currently, well, for this year, we have 39 contracts done, but when we went live, we almost tripled the number of contracts. In just 1 year, we did the same number of contracts that we did in 10 years before. Because we reduced the time to create and sign a contract from 4 days to 19 seconds. And the lending operation, we almost is not doubled, is tenfold the number of lendings from when we went live with the system. Okay. The first lesson that we learned when we have this network running for so much time is the first problem is how you add new infrastructure and new participants to your current network. It's very painful if you do this by hand. We have identified 3 dimensions for this kind of scaling that is horizontal scaling. So we have, where is the pointer? ¿Dónde está el láser? Ya no está. Okay, don't worry. So we have first different layers for our solution. You need hardware. You can use in a cloud provider or on-premise. Over that, you have the typical network infrastructure. You need firewall. You need security. You need the monitor. You need to monitor your wall infrastructure. Name resolution. Over that, you have your container layer. That is important to scale. With your container layer, you need first an orchestrator. We started with Docker Swarm. And you create overlay networks, and over that you have your fabric network separated in channels. And you create specific services to access your blockchain network and platform services for all your business needs. Okay, first, how you do the internal growth or the internal horizontal scale. What we did is moving from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes. Docker Swarm is very good to create quickly and easily a container orchestrator and network, but is very lacking from the administration perspective. So the first thing that we have to do is switch orchestrator. And currently we are using Kubernetes in our testing environment and also for production. Okay, the second dimension is how you integrate an external participant. This is the most painful point that we identify for horizontal growth. Because they have their own infrastructure, they have their own hardware provider. It can be on-premise, it can be on cloud. They have their own network and container infrastructure, and you can suggest things, but you cannot mandate. So how you do this? First, we started with an ad hoc install, but it's not easily replicated. So we standardized this, providing our participants with our own Docker images for access APIs and our standardized configuration for peers. And finally, how you can easily provide also an external growth is we have right now a customer that doesn't want to provide their own infrastructure. So I won't mention who is, but they came to us and they said, I want infrastructure in some place of the world, in the US precisely, and I don't want to create any infrastructure. Okay, we as a stock exchange will provide you a node as a service. So it's an easier way to grow your infrastructure because now you are in control of all the configuration, software version, etc. Okay, that is for how you grow your network. But let's look inside the software factory right now. Okay, to synthesize the effort with the maintenance team, we have 3 different issues that has to be solved. First is training. The research and development team, that in this case I'm in charge with that team, has all the knowledge. We concentrate all the information because it's the team that created the minimum viable product. The problem is that it's not the team that will maintain the solution. So you have a lot of knowledge, skills, and procedures that you have to pass on the maintenance team, and they need training, a lot of training. Second is hardening. When you go to production, your solution will be as good as you can. To go to production, you have schedules to meet, so some sacrifice will be done. But to maintain this in the long term, you have to do a lot of hardening because the rest of your solution in production has a higher grade for standards, for a higher standard for security. And finally, since the business is dynamic, you have to integrate new use cases to your platform. How you can do that also requires a lot of training, but for the business analysts. Okay, well, this is a DevOps structure that we are currently working together with IBM, that is helping us with consultancy services. And we identified that the main effort that you have to do is culture. You have to establish a new culture. You need to have all your maintenance team, your developers, designers, security managers, and product owners and operator teams on this new culture of decentralized application, decentralized solution. And it's a process that can take a lot of time and is not easy. So let's look a bit inside this. First, for the development efforts, since you will need to create new value, business value, the development and maintenance team, what they need to be trained on core blockchain concept. I mean, real core concepts from Satoshi Nakamoto upward. Also, you need to train them about Hyperledger specific concept. In our case, was Hyperledger Fabric. You need to train them on the use of the Fabric SDKs. And also, since you created ad hoc APIs and REST services for your solution, you have to train about them also. And this is the hardest part, is training them how to use containers and orchestrators. Normally one uses that a lot, but it's a very obscure knowledge. And how to create or maintain chain code, since they will see that as a traditional program, but you know it's not a traditional, it's a state machine, and a distributed state machine, so you need to explain how to create a distributed code that has to work in conjunction. And finally, the development and maintenance team have to catch up on the development tools, integrated development environment, continuous integration system, new programming languages, etc. For the product owners instead, and the business analyst, you also have to train them about a blockchain core concept, Hyperledger Fabric concepts, how to integrate distributed ledger technologies to the business process, and how to design solutions based on Hyperledger Fabric. And finally, it's good to train them how to model chain code. So you need a short-term plan for the maintenance team and a long-term plan for the new functionality, so business analysts and development teams. Next, how you test your application. Okay, let's move on. First, you need that your development and maintenance team has to be trained in how to do distributed testing over many peers. You just don't have to test on your local machine. It's the typical development answer. Hey, but it looks on my computer, right? So it has to work everywhere. This is not for blockchain solutions. You have to test also, in your test, you have to consider also external organizations that participate in your network. So you have two options normally, or you onboard them on your test phases and on your distributed tests, or you simulate them on your test. Normally we use option 2. We have some placeholder brokerage house for our testings. And finally, you have to train how you build, package, and deploy the chain code. For the business analyst and the product owner, you have to train them how to do the functional testing for distributed application. And for the operator and configuration management team, you need to train them about containers and orchestrator. They don't have to be expert, but they need to grasp the basic of this technology. And also how they have to build, package, and deploy the chain code that the maintenance and development team will pass to them. Next is the cultural change for staging and production environment. So for staging, and I will be talking about a bit this in deep later, is how to execute the setup of the staging environment and how to test your solution there. For the operator and configuration management team, also I will be explaining this a bit more in detail, how you do the network upgrades and the network expansions. Network expansion, I mean adding new organizations or new peers. And for the security team, they have to take control of the certificate authority service, so they will be the administrator of the service, and the main task will be issue and revocate certificates. Next, for the hardening, you have, normally when you do hardening of any solution, you just consider the hardware or the virtualization platform until the operative system, and some basic services, databases, directories, web servers, etc. But we saw that you need to consider at least 3 more dimensions in your hardening. You have to harden the nodes itself, the ledger, and the applications. For the nodes, for example, you need to do some vulnerability scan because they are based on, the nodes are based, since our container are based on a base container that can be scanned. You have to do a design review of your network topology, redundancy test, what happens if a node goes down, synchronization test, well, you have to check if everything goes out of synchronization, the clock is queued for every node, what happened. You also could do some test on the consensus algorithm if it is tuned enough for your solution. You need to decide which size of key you will be using for your cryptographical keys and where you will store that and how you secure the storage for the cryptographical keys. For the ledger, you have to test what happens if you have to test if you have information leak, because since the smart contracts are programmed by humans, the humans can leak some information and they cannot foresee that. Since we are using, as an example, we are using channels and we have synchronization between them, maybe some information doesn't have to be synchronized between some channels. You have to check the functionality of the chain code. You have to do peer review of the chain code to check if it's secure enough. Dynamic code analysis and manual code analysis over the chain code that is deployed. Finally, your application, since in your case are mainly REST services based, you have to do your test over the APIs. And also you can apply the OWASP top 10 to your application with one exception. The exception is the OWASP rule number 4, that is XML external it does not directly apply to our fabric network. Okay, moving next. Your solution has to evolve and in your case integrate new markets. So we added technical processes to our solution and also added, as an example, new markets. And those new markets propose new challenges. We added in January 2019 fixed income to our network, and we are finalizing the test for adding international custodians and collaterals. And all of that was done by the maintenance team, not by the research and development team. Okay. So for the technical process that were added, we added business checks for the external components of the network. We added a more detailed monitoring and alerting system. We created a process to mirror, to do mirroring between production and staging. And also, we had to do several Fabric upgrades, version upgrades, and we are doing right now the migration of the consensus protocol also, from Kafka to Raft. Okay, why do you need business checks? It's easy, because the external components, the probability that they will fail is 1. They will fail eventually. And the business requires consistency. So what we did is establish an automated check for some business processes that require consistency, and use it a single tool to consolidate the checks and the repair actions. Our maintenance team, as an example, is proficient in the use of Jenkins, so we create a lot of automated checks on our Jenkins orchestrator. And for that, you need to plan transaction to repair, to bring to the correct state your data in the chain code. As an example, we have a market data client that is a program based on the financial exchange protocol, fixed protocol, and it's a data feed consumer for a market operation. Normally, in a normal day, it will consume short sale trades information and injects to the Fabric network through specific transaction, but this program can fail sometime. And if that fails, we have a consistency check that is executed on specific hour to preemptively alert that there is an inconsistency, and the alert will be sent by email in this case. Next, we have that you need to have good monitoring and alert system. The idea here is to cover at least the 4 metrics of golden rule for any system: latency, the traffic rate, the error rate, and the saturation. Saturation as understood as the number of CPU claims that are not met by the orchestrator, or also you can use a CPU starvation as a replacement. Or, as I like to understand that, is please give me more cores. Okay, since we went in production, we identified that the critical metric for the Fabric network in our production environment is the CouchDB saturation. If the CouchDB is starved, is CPU starved, we know that we have serious problem. And for the external component is the API error rate and the API latency that will signal immediately to us that we have a problem also. And for that, you have to establish real-time alert mechanism by email, instant messaging, SMS, etc. Okay, and well, in this diagram, this is the streamlined version of our solution. We are using this for a new development that we are creating over our Fabric network. It's a very generic way to understand what are we doing. And since you have the end user system with the graphical user interface and external system, you have the communication layer with the firewall and load balancer, the external access of the applications with the business API and apps, and the authentication authorization service. You have the internal access layer for your application with the integration API, and also with a smart contract query cache that we have created to optimize some queries that are very slow. You have the common service APIs, for example, reports API, mailing, schedules task, legacy access. Finally, we have two generic APIs, a blockchain client and a blockchain administrator API. And we have our blockchain runtime that is mainly based on Hyperledger Fabric. So we have created an environment mirroring process because we have to test any new release over the same production hardware or the same production cluster. So how we can test production without injecting data into production. We create a clone of our production environment over production, but we only clone. First, we create a clone of the Fabric network, an exact clone using the orchestrator, and we create a copy of the integration APIs to access the clone network. So the all the system doesn't know that it's accessing a staging environment using the production entry points. Okay, moving next, how we have done upgrades to the Fabric network. You can upgrade your node, you can upgrade your client SDK, your chain code SDK, or also the chain code itself, the consensus protocol, and also the application and services that are satellites that are working with your solution. Okay, first, for the Fabric network upgrade, we have identified that it affects mainly just the orderer and the peer node. It doesn't affect the rest of the solution because for the upgrade is the easiest one. You have just to upgrade the image container version and you are done, unless you want to also upgrade the capabilities of the network. Next is the client SDK. For upgrading the client SDK, you will affect the peer nodes, your access API, and also your integration API. And as a bonus, we also saw that every time we are upgrading the client SDK, we are also affecting the smart contract query cache. Next is the chain code SDK. It will affect directly the smart contract. You have to redeploy them because you need to install and instantiate the smart contract with the new chain code compiling creation environment, the CCM. And it can require also that you upgrade your nodes and your client application. And the consensus affects mainly the peer nodes, the orderer nodes, and your access API, but also needs a backup and a shutdown, partial or total shutdown of your network. It depends on how you're doing this. And from the business aspect is the change that doesn't give you business value. How you can justify this upgrade is very hard, but you have to do that. And finally, the application and services, you will mainly affect your services API integration and your business apps, but also it might require all the previous upgrade if needed, because maybe you are using new network capabilities for your APIs, and also you have to do the consensus upgrade, node upgrade, etc. Okay.
Thank you, Marcos. So the question was, what is next now? So we decide to work together with those companies to create a new ecosystem to run different applications based in Hyperledger Fabric. GTD is a telecom company with a lot of infrastructure. Santiago Exchange, I already talked about that. And DCB is the Chilean depository. So we will be working on this during this year and next year. And this is a representation of what we want to do now. So in the bottom, you can see all the things that we have to create to make this possible. Every category here has a huge backlog of stuff that we have to develop, and we include that, the governance, because we know that is one of the most important things that we have to create here. Then in the center, you can see a solution providers layer. We will provide an SDK node, a help desk, billing solutions, etc. And you can see spinning different networks based in Indy, for example, Hyperledger Fabric. And in the top, we will have different apps running, and they will be used by different companies in the financial market. And the first application that we will have there, obviously, will be the one that Marco talked about, securities lending. So our roadmap basically is we will develop for 2 years using Scrum. And now we are talking with different solution providers and different members, general members. So if you guys have any app that you think that could work in our country, talk with us later. And well, we're planning to have also a hackathon on October in this year to test our SDK. So that's it. Thank you so much for all of you, and if you have any question or something, talk with us.
Thank you. Any question?
What underlying infrastructure did you deploy the Fabric network on?
Okay, I will repeat. You ask what kind of underlying infrastructure we deployed our solution? Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't want to talk about that because we can talk for hours about that. But if you want, I can explain you later. But we did this originally in an hybrid solution on-premise and in cloud. So we wanted to test the technology and see if we could create an hybrid network based on cloud providers and our own on-premise infrastructure. But is from the orchestrator perspective, it's just a local network. Yes?
When you bring on new peers, are those brought on to your hybrid cloud, or are you had one example where you bought infrastructure as a service for the client, but are you generally bringing on your hybrid infrastructure, or are they buying their own cloud subscription on IBM Cloud? Or?
Both. The answer is both. They can bring their own infrastructure, they can rent infrastructure from any provider, or we can provide them with infrastructure, dedicated infrastructure as a service. So we have the 3 ways of operating this.
Did you also have API bridge?
And also we have API bridge. Because there are some brokerage houses that they don't want to invest in any kind of infrastructure, but they have the expertise to do integration to APIs.
One other question about the
Sure.
upgrade. You had mentioned you changed from Docker orchestration to Kubernetes. Did you do that at the same time as your protocol upgrade? Or?
No, no. It's insane to try to change all at the same time. Any other question? Good question. Normally the upgrade of the Fabric version, if you just upgrade the runtime, will not affect the data, but you have to do that in conjunction with the client SDK. Because if you upgrade your peer version, we saw that you need to also go hand to hand with the client SDK version, because you will lose some functionalities. Or when we went from 1.1 to 1.2, we tried to upgrade the client SDK and we had a lot of problems. Yes?
So I have a question about the staging environment. You mentioned that you copy the production system for staging environment. So do you copy private key system or do you use other private key for staging environment?
Well, for the staging environment, it's very strange for other industry, but we have to test everything, every new functionality in production. So for a traditional system that use databases, it's very easy. You can do a backup and restore. You do a backup, you do all your tests, and you just apply your restore. But for blockchain, how you delete transactions, you cannot do that. So that's why we created this clone system that creates a clone of the production network over the production environment. And we copy everything from the production environment. Okay. Well, if there are, we can talk about later if you want. We are open to any question. And thank you very much.